So you've made the decision to learn another language, and now if you're watching this video, you're probably wondering what language to learn. Well, there's a lot of factors to consider when making that decision, but hopefully after watching this video, you'll have a better idea of what the right language is to learn for you. What's up everyone, welcome to the channel, and if you're new to the channel, then as always, my name's Ian. I'm an American polyglot that's been learning languages for the better part of the last 10 years, and I now speak 7 languages fluently. And you can find videos of me speaking all of these languages elsewhere on my channel. But today, we're talking about what the right language is to learn. Well, this is a subjective question, of course, and everyone decides this for themselves. But I'm assuming if you're watching this video, then like me, at one point, you decided you were going to learn another language, and you couldn't really decide which one to learn in particular. There's so many out there. There's so many that you might want to learn, but which one do you learn first? Well, today I'm going to walk through this decision-making process with you and give you some facts that you need to know before you make this decision so you can decide what the best language it is for you to learn specifically. So without further ado, let's get into it. So at the crux of it, when you want to decide what language is right for you, well, you need to consider what your goals are. And this can be a little bit difficult to consider when you may have many different goals in mind. But if your primary goal is to feel close to a particular culture or country, then, well, that makes your decision-making process a lot easier. That's the language for you to learn. If you're like me, an Indian person who grew up in the United States, well, if I wanted to feel closer to my culture and my heritage, naturally I would want to learn Hindi or one of the other Indian languages. If, for example, you have an affinity for anime, you love watching anime, whatever, Attack on Titans, you name it, and you wanted to learn the original language and you wanted to just immerse yourself in Japanese culture, well, there you have it. You learn Japanese. And if that's you, well, you can stop watching this video right here because, well, that answers your question. But for those of you who have other goals in mind, let's say career advancement, for example, you need to consider what language will get you the furthest. By far, the best language for career advancement across most industries around the world is English.
English, motherfucker! Do you speak it?
If you speak English, this will probably get you further than any other language out there because English is the language of travel, of business, of entertainment, of media, of so much. But if you're watching this video and you're understanding everything I'm saying, chances are you already know English and this isn't a piece of advice you need to hear. So then consider exactly where you live and where you work. If you work at BMW, for example, you might want to learn German because that might help you advance in your career at the company. If you work at L'Oreal or another French company, well, then you might want to learn French because that'll get you further. Or perhaps if you live in Central Europe, where a lot of business opportunities come through working with German companies, again, you might want to consider learning German. Or if you work in South America, or you plan to work in South America for whatever reason, Spanish. There you go. So these 2 categories are probably the most easy when it comes to deciding which language you want to learn, because it's all subjective and it's all based on something you probably already know. Now we get into more tricky territory. If you've decided to learn a new language as an additional skill, as a method of self-improvement, for example, well then you want to consider what exactly you prioritize. Do you care about the difficulty of a language, the usefulness of a language, or do you care about the ability to travel with a language? Let's start off with the utility of a language. The 6 official languages of the United Nations are English, Arabic, Chinese, Russian, French, and Spanish. And they're the official languages of the UN for good reason. These are some of the most spoken languages in the world. By learning all 6 of these languages, you can speak with more than 50% of the entire planet, because these languages are some of the most spread out languages in the world, most popular languages in the world, and these are the languages that will dominate the world for the next however many years. Now, these languages are all very different from one another, and learning all 6 of them would be an impressive feat, to say the least. But if you want to learn a language with the most utility, the language that will allow you to communicate with the most amount of speakers, then you want to focus on these 6 languages. Now, which one in particular doesn't really matter. What matters more in this case is which region of the world you're more interested in. If you're interested in East Asia, naturally it would be Chinese. If you're interested in the Middle East and North Africa, Arabic. If you're interested in Europe, then English or French or Spanish, for example. But if you're looking for a useful language, you want to focus on one of the 6 official languages of the UN. Now, what if you're concerned more about the difficulty of a language rather than its usefulness? What if you just want to learn another language and you don't really care about how useful it is or how many people speak it, you just want to learn another language, and so you're more focused on how easy it is to learn a new language. If that sounds like you, and that's something that's important to you, then what you need to do is sit down and examine your own native language and the language family from which it comes, because this will ultimately tell you what language it is that you should learn. The easiest language for you to learn is going to be a language that is adjacent to your own, or rather, a language that's related to yours on the language family tree. I'm going to use English as an example because that's the language in which I'm making this video, and that is my native language. For an English speaker like me, the easiest languages to learn would be other Germanic languages and a few Romance languages. So these are languages such as Dutch, Norwegian, Swedish, but also languages such as French, Spanish, and Portuguese because of the heavy influence that Romance languages have had on English and the familiarity of a lot of vocabulary words between the Romance languages and English, as well as the grammar. A useful tool here is the Foreign Service Institute rankings. Now, disclaimer, this ranking system is based on the English language itself. So this will be useful for those of you who speak English very well or are native speakers of English. But according to the Foreign Service Institute, the easiest languages to learn for an English speaker are the ones I just stated, the Germanic languages and Romance languages. So Norwegian, Swedish, Dutch, Spanish, French, Italian. These languages are estimated to take 24 weeks to learn, or about 600 in-class hours to learn fluently. And this is because these are the closest related languages to English. Now, if you speak another language, like Russian, for example, well, then you need to do the same exercise with the Russian side of the language tree. And so for you, the easiest languages would be Ukrainian, Belarusian, Polish, those kind of languages. But then keep in mind, these languages might be easy to learn, but you might not find as many resources and there might not be as many people that speak these languages. So that's another thing to consider. Now, if you're on the other end of the spectrum and you're looking for a language that's very difficult because you want to mentally stimulate yourself, and again, you're not really concerned about how many people speak this language, rather you want a difficult language, something that's going to challenge you and something that you can work on, well, then you take the exact same thing you did to find the easiest language and you do the opposite. So for English speakers, you can go on the Foreign Service Institute website and find the languages that take the longest to learn. Now, for native English speakers, according to the Foreign Service Institute, these languages are Arabic, Chinese, Korean, Japanese, languages that take an average of 88 weeks or over 2,200 in-class hours to learn fluently. And again, that's just for English speakers. If you're a non-native English speaker, then you want to take your native language, examine its tree, and then go to the opposite side of the field. And that's how you'll figure out what language would be the most difficult one for you to learn. For example, if you're a native Mandarin Chinese speaker, then the hardest language for you to learn would be Russian or Hungarian, something with a lot of cases or a non-Latin script that you'd have to learn. And yeah, that'll really give you a run for your money. Next, let's talk about travel. If you're someone who's concerned more about travel and you want to learn a new language to be able to enjoy your travels better, well, again, by far the best language for you to learn in this case would be English. But I'm going to make the assumption that if you're watching this video, you already speak English. The next best languages to learn for travel purposes are all going to be based on where you want to travel. If you're traveling throughout Europe, you're probably best off learning English. But depending on where you are in Europe, you might be better off learning Spanish, German, French, or just English. And if you're traveling throughout South America, naturally, you would want to learn Spanish. And if you're traveling throughout Africa, you might want to learn French or Arabic. And if you're traveling throughout Eurasia, you'd want to learn Russian. And if you're traveling through China, you'd want to learn Chinese. But being an English speaker, you already have the biggest advantage there is when it comes to travel. You might find language barriers here and there, but it's by far the best language to learn if you're focused on traveling. Finally, this brings us to my last point in this video. Everything I've said so far has been directed at what language you should learn based on your priorities. Your priorities could be the ones I've listed in this video or something completely different. But irregardless of what your priorities are, one thing that you should really consider, and something that I wish I'd considered when I first started learning my languages, is the availability of resources. If you're going to learn a more niche language, you're going to have a harder time finding resources to learn that language compared to more common languages. For example, if you're trying to learn Norwegian, well, Norwegian would be very easy for you to learn as an English speaker, but you might not find as many resources to learn Norwegian, nor would you be able to practice it as often compared to a language like Spanish. And so make sure that you pick a language that you'll have an easy time finding resources for, especially if you don't live in that country and you don't live in that environment. that'll really make or break your learning experience. Because if you choose a language that's easy because it's related to your native one, but you pick a language that has no resources to learn, it can very well become one of the hardest languages for you to learn. Alright, so we're going to start to wrap up this video right here, and if there's one thing that you should take away from this, it's that there are many factors to consider when learning a language, and the most important one is you. You need to consider what you care about, what you prioritize, and that's going to lead you to the language that you want to learn. There are things to consider, which I've mentioned in this video, and hopefully this video is what you needed to make the final decision on what language it is that you want to learn. Anyways, if there's something that I didn't mention in this video that you'd like to mention it down in the comments below. I'm sure it'll help other people out, and it might even help me out. And if you're interested in learning more about languages, then don't forget to leave a like, subscribe, and share the video. That helps me out. That shows the algorithm that you love me, and then the algorithm will love me back. And so, do all that stuff and check out my other videos. But otherwise, I hope this video helped you make that final decision and get started on your own language learning journey. Otherwise, I'll catch you guys in the next video. Thanks for watching.